No background checks for ammo, permitless carry, and sanctuary cities. We're going to talk about them all today.
Hey, you're that Idaho guy, right?
Who, me? No.
Yes, you are. I saw you get out of that big lifted truck over there.
Damn, is it really that noticeable? One of the first questions I get from people relocating to Idaho from other states is in regards to concealed carry. And like many other states, Idaho allowed concealed carry as long as you had your CCP. No, not that CCP, a concealed weapons permit. And after several years and several revisions of the law in the state, we now have constitutional carry in Idaho, meaning as long as you're over 18, not exempt from owning a firearm, you can carry in the state without needing a permit. It's been brought to my attention by many of you in California that there are some new laws that kind of really restrict your right to where you can and can't carry, making it next to impossible to exercise your Second Amendment right. And in Idaho, we really don't have that here, aside from the federal restrictions like K-12 schools, courthouses, and government buildings. I was just on a Zoom call the other week with some clients who are looking to move up here to Idaho from California, and naturally the conversation evolved into carrying firearms. And I was telling them that during hunting season, I typically always have a couple guns in my truck at all times, whether I'm going to the gym or just driving around showing houses, because I never really know when I'm going to go drive by an area or I'm going to have an hour to kill and I might go and try and shoot some ducks or something along those lines. Just the other week, I went coyote hunting, and naturally I had my rifle sitting in the passenger seat of my truck, and I didn't have any issues with that or feel concerned at all about somebody breaking into my truck or even being pulled over or anything like that. And getting into the being pulled over brought up the question about transportation of firearms in Idaho. There's no real restrictions on transportation in Idaho. Like I said, I had my rifle in the front seat of my car, and I even had the magazine full of shells. There's nothing against the law in that. And in Idaho, we don't even have a duty to disclose that you have a firearm if you are pulled over by an officer. Idaho, just like any other states, does require a background check to purchase a firearm unless you're doing private sales.
Here.
Pleasure doing business with you.
So if I personally wanted to sell a firearm to somebody else, whether it be somebody I know or maybe somebody I don't know, since it's just a personal transfer, I don't have to conduct a background check or go through an FFL to oversee the transfer. Idaho, unlike several other states like Oregon, uses a federal background check system when you're purchasing a firearm. The nice thing about this is the speed in which you're purchasing that firearm. The whole process is just lightning quick. There are no waits essentially when you're purchasing a firearm because of this background check system that we use. There's no backlogs. The last few guns that I bought from stores, I was in and out in 15 to 30 minutes. And usually it was because I was just chit-chatting and just, BSing people behind the counter or whatnot, talking about my gun. So had I wanted to be in and out quick, I probably could have done it in less than 15 minutes. Just last year, I went on a trip through Oregon, and I went to a sportsman's warehouse just to see what the purchasing process was like, because I know Oregon's process is much different than Idaho's, and I haven't seen California's, but I'm assuming it's way more stringent than Oregon's. And from talking to the employees working at the sportsman's warehouse there, I am eternally grateful to live in Idaho, because they were talking about waiting for guns. Like, you go in, you pick the gun that you like, then you have to do your background check, and then you have a waiting period, and then you have to go through this whole drawn out process to get the firearm. So you could be months down the road between when you actually see the firearm in store, pay for it, and then when you walk out of the store with the firearm. So how exactly does Idaho stack up in terms of gun violence?
If you're approached in the street by a robber, do you think you'd be able to defend yourself?
No.
Good. Give me your money.
As a state with the third and fourth highest gun ownership rate, depending on where you look, if guns really are the problem, then we should see that reflected in the statistics. And many sources would like you to believe that Idaho really does have a gun violence problem because it's touted as the 16th worst state for gun violence in the entire US. This definitely paints a certain picture, and in my opinion, it's not really a fair shake, and it's a dishonest way to sway people who don't know any better. Idaho and the entire US, unfortunately, is going through a mental health crisis, and because of that, there is a high rate of suicides going on across the entire country. And this is never an easy thing to talk about or even bring up in this video because it truly is tragic. Suicides in Idaho account for 87% of the gun violence in the state, which is why I mentioned before that I believe the statistics are presented dishonestly and in a way to sway people that isn't necessarily true. So if we look at purely homicides, we see a completely different story. Let's compare California to Idaho. According to many sources, California is touted as the #1 safest state in the US for the best gun laws. With a homicide rate of 4.1 deaths per 100,000, that means 16 1,600 people lose their lives every single year in California due to homicide with a firearm. Now let's compare that to Idaho with supposedly the 48th worst gun laws in the entire nation, just a few places away from being dead last. Idaho has about 2 deaths per 100,000 people per year, which equates to about 20 people in the state losing their lives to homicide with a firearm. And that statistic includes police-involved shootings as well. So now that we looked at the actual numbers that I feel really accurately represent the statistics, it makes you kind of second guess all these so-called professionals that are shouting these claims from the rooftops.
Hornswoggling Kroger is gonna roll away biscuit cutter.
Now, who can argue with that?
One of the many great things about Idaho is that we have a ton of public land. 63% of the state is public land, whether it be national forest, BLM, or state-owned land. With that comes a ton of areas where you can go out and shoot your gun. Even around the Treasure Valley, there are millions of acres of public land, whether you're north, south, east, or west of town. Shooting outside designated ranges is definitely nice for some elbow room, but with that definitely comes some extra responsibilities. First and foremost, ensure that you're actually allowed to shoot there. Second is be aware of your surroundings, whether there are other people out shooting or hiking or riding dirt bikes. There are many times when I've been out shooting, and had I not been extremely cautious, I would have been shooting right when somebody rips over a hill with a dirt bike or a four-wheeler not paying attention. So that extra layer of caution is definitely something that needs to be exercised. One activity that is particularly concerning to me in regards to shooting on public land, and it's definitely increasing in popularity in the last few years here in the Boise area, is mountain bikes. They come ripping around corners and flying down trails, and they have no sound because they have no engines at all, and they are moving really fast. So you really have to keep your head on a swivel. And it seems like, from my perspective as a shooter, I don't want to step on anybody's toes, but as my perspective, being outdoors and actively hunting, I'll have people come ripping by on mountain bikes just because they think, it's a safe place to go ride. And, even as I am exercising extreme caution, accidents do happen. This isn't an excuse, but there needs to be a level of consideration on everybody when out in the outdoors because, stuff is starting to collide with the amount of growth and people just enjoying the outdoors. Now, of course, we definitely have designated shooting ranges, and to my knowledge, there's only one in the area that is actually indoors, and the rest are going to be outdoors. Now, if you're keen on getting out and busting some clays, there are several sporting clays courses here in the area. I frequently go out to Homedale to Idaho Sporting Clays. They've got a couple courses out there. You'll catch me out in the summer out there doing the leagues, doing fun shoots. And there's also another course just north of Eagle. It's called Rock Creek Trapper Club, I believe. Really nice course. Some world-class shooters practice there. And I believe there's going to be a world tournament there this year. Don't quote me on that. But if you want to get out and be among the best, definitely go check that out. It's pretty cool.
Now, if we're going in line with all of our other firearms laws in Idaho, then you'd probably imagine that we have really reasonable self-defense laws. And you'd be right about that. In Idaho, we like to call it FAFO, or in other words, fuck around, find out.
Just kidding. However, unlike the entire west coast of the United States, you actually do have the right to defend yourself and your family by whatever means necessary in Idaho because of our stand your ground law. I keep hearing so many stories over and over again where people in either California or Oregon or something along that, a state that has really strict gun laws, legitimately uses their firearm to protect either themselves or their family from imminent death in a completely justified situation, and the state reprimands them and punishes them for it, which makes me eternally grateful to live in the state that I do. Because of the rights in Idaho, I believe this is why our crime rate is so low. With a gun ownership rate of about 60% in Idaho, criminals are a lot less likely to try and rob somebody or break into their house when there's a 6 out of 10 chance or 60% chance that they're going to have a gun pulled on them and it's not going to go the way they intended to.
Hey, old man, give me everything.
Call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me!
But keep in mind, Idaho has no firearm registration, so this 60% number is a guess, and if I had to tweak this to what I know, I would send it way up. So if you're from California, which likely many of you on here are, you're probably familiar with the term sanctuary city, pertaining to the nation's immigration laws. This saying, if a city declares itself a sanctuary city, it's not going to enforce any of the immigration laws in the state. Well, Idaho has our own version of sanctuary cities, and it applies to the Second Amendment. Several cities throughout the entire state of Idaho have declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuary cities Just like with immigration laws, Second Amendment sanctuary cities are not going to enforce any laws that they deem unconstitutional. So local municipalities aren't going to enforce any of those laws. However, that's not going to stop the ATF from showing up at your door. Nice thing about Idaho as well, it is also in our Constitution that we're not going to enforce any laws that the state deems unconstitutional pertaining to firearms. California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and 17 other states in the U.S. have red flag gun laws. For those of you who don't know what a red flag gun law is, I'm going to read you the definition right here. A red flag law is a gun violence prevention law that permits a state court to order the temporary removal of firearms from a person who they believe may present a danger to others or themselves. Up front, when you hear that, you might think, as any other rational person might think, that sounds pretty good. I don't see the issue with that. But let me ask you this one question. What other God-given right, constitutional right, can be taken away from you based on no evidence, no due process, just because somebody said something and how they feel about it? That should paint the entire picture of red flag gun laws. And that's why I believe it is such a concerning issue. That's like saying we're going to take away your right to vote because you may or may not vote for something we feel is threatening to us. Wait a minute.
Colorado Supreme Court banning former President Donald Trump from the state's primary ballot.
Can kids have guns in Idaho? As a general rule of thumb, the answer is going to be no.
Hello.
Unless they fall under a few exceptions. If they're hunting on private property, participating in a class or training, or if they are actively engaged in hunting. This exception about hunting is a huge one in Idaho because it's like a rite of passage for all the kids in the state. While all the other kids are going to their elementary graduations, Idaho kids are passing their hunter's ed. One of the many nice things about living in Idaho is going to pertain to ammo. And not only do I not have to do a background check to purchase ammo, I can go to Walmart and Walmart still sells firearms and ammo. I'm getting off topic here. However, you can ship ammo, you can purchase it online and have it shipped to your front door, and you don't have to provide any sort of ID or pay a hazmat charge or anything along those lines. And more so than just being super convenient, over the last couple years with COVID and stores not having ammunition in stock, it was super nice. If you needed to get ammo, you could just order it online and not wait for it to get to the store, show up right at your front door. Or myself, I go duck hunting, waterfowl hunting a lot, and I like to use specialty kind of ammo like bismuth. There's a supplier that I like to use. It's a small veteran-owned company, Boss Shot Shells, and I purchase all my waterfowl ammo from them, and it comes all the way from the other side of the country, and it shows up right at my front door. No extra hazmat charge. I don't have to provide any ID. Simply plug in my credit card. Super convenient, and if you have some sort of specialty ammo that you need, this makes it a breeze to get a hold of it. Now, I've had several people ask me that, yeah, Isaac, I get it. You have the right to do this in your state, but what's the culture around carrying and having guns? Do people appreciate it? Are they going to ostracize you from the community? And honestly, from my perspective and my opinion and my experiences, this hasn't been the case. The entire culture around guns in the Boise area is super welcoming. If you have somebody come up to talk to you when you're carrying, they're probably going to ask you what you're carrying, and then that's going to delve into an hour-long conversation about why you think Smith & Wesson is better than Glock. You can't change my mind on that. For instance, just this last year, I was heading up to the mountains to go elk hunting, and I needed to make a quick stop at the life store, which is Costco, to pick up some groceries before I hit the hills. So my buddy and I, we ran into Costco, picked up our necessary groceries, and as we were walking out, we decided to stop by the food court, grab some food, and hit the road. While we were eating our food, one of the associates came up to us, and I had completely forgotten I was open carrying my 44 and my buddy was open carrying his 45 because we were heading to the hills. And had this associate not said anything, I wouldn't have even realized that. Where I'm getting at with this, I didn't have any nasty looks or people just being generally unfriendly or unwelcoming to me as I'm walking through Costco with a cannon on my hip. I mean, we were walking around the store looking like Rambo and nobody gave me any issues. Anyways, this associate, he said, "Hey, we appreciate that you're exercising your Second Amendment right, but just as looking forward to the future, just please conceal carry. We don't have anything against it. We just prefer that you conceal carry." So I think that speaks volumes to the culture around firearms in the area. And one of my favorite things to do that attests to the culture around firearms in the area is go to the local gun shows. The Ford Idaho Center is the biggest event center in the entire state. We have the Snake River Stampede. We have Monster Jam. We have the state championships for all sorts of sports, wrestling, basketball, you name it's in there. We have a gun show every single month that goes on at the Ford Idaho Center. And, people are lining up outside. They've got their firearms. You walk inside and people buy and sell and trade firearms in the gun show just like that. So if there was a serious issue, with firearms and people not liking firearms, I seriously doubt that I would be able to walk into the biggest event center in the state with a shotgun over my shoulder and a whole other line of people who are doing that, Every time I go in, I try to sell a firearm and I walk out with 3 more. So my game isn't totally honed, but it is what it is. Just a note that I have to add to this, all the firearms that you've seen in this video, I unfortunately lost in a boating accident in the river. So I no longer have them. I hope this video was helpful. If you would like to see many more just like it, check them out right here. Until next week, I'm Isaac Crace with Top Idaho Real Estate, your 3rd generation Idaho Realtor.